Ladies and gentlemen, there comes a moment in life when everything feels unsettled, when love no longer feels like love, when peace feels distant, and when your heart knows something your mind is still afraid to admit. You didn't click on this by accident. If you've ever felt drained by someone who once felt like home, if you've questioned your sanity while trying to save a connection, this message is for you, because before the universe removes a narcissist from your life, it sends signs. Quiet at first, then undeniable. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to hear may explain your pain, restore your clarity, and change the way you see your story forever. Before clarity ever arrives, confusion always comes first. And that confusion is not an accident. It is the universe gently shaking the ground beneath you, because the life you're standing in no longer aligns with who you are becoming. When a narcissist is still in your life, nothing ends cleanly or clearly. Instead, everything becomes blurred. Conversations leave you questioning yourself. Promises sound convincing, but never materialize. One day you feel deeply connected, and the next you feel invisible. This emotional whiplash is not random. It is the universe creating discomfort where you've grown too comfortable with pain. Confusion is often the first crack in the illusion. As long as things feel familiar, even when they hurt, the mind resists change. The universe knows this, so it introduces uncertainty. It disrupts the patterns you relied on. It forces you to sit with unanswered questions, not to punish you, but to wake you up. Because clarity cannot enter a space where denial still feels safer than truth. In this phase, you may feel lost. You may replay conversations, doubt your memory, question your reactions, and wonder if you're the problem. But what's really happening is a shift. The old story you told yourself about the relationship is collapsing. The version of reality they carefully controlled is beginning to crack. And when that happens, confusion is inevitable. Think of it like being in a dark room when the lights suddenly turn on. For a moment, everything looks distorted. Your eyes struggle to adjust. That discomfort doesn't mean the light is wrong. It means you've been in the dark for too long. The universe unsettles you before it frees you. It allows confusion to rise so clarity can follow. And when clarity finally comes, it won't arrive loudly. It will arrive quietly, with a calm certainty that says, this no longer makes sense because it was never meant to. And once that confusion has settled in, once your mind is tired of chasing answers that never arrive, something deeper begins to happen. The uncertainty moves out of your thoughts and into your body. You wake up already drained. Your chest feels heavy before a single word is spoken. The relationship no longer just confuses you, it exhausts you. This is where the second sign reveals itself. Emotional exhaustion doesn't arrive all at once. It builds quietly, day by day, in the small moments where you silence yourself to keep the peace. In the nights you overthink every sentence before you speak. In the mornings you promise yourself to try harder, to be calmer, more understanding, more patient, even though you're already giving more than you have. You begin to notice that love feels like labor, that being close to them requires constant vigilance. You are always monitoring their moods, adjusting your tone, anticipating reactions, bracing for the next shift. And without realizing it, you stop resting, not just physically, but emotionally. Your nervous system stays on edge, always alert, always preparing for impact. This kind of exhaustion is not normal tiredness. Sleep doesn't fix it. Time off doesn't fix it. Because the source of the fatigue is not your schedule. It's the emotional weight of carrying a connection that no longer carries you back. Your spirit grows weary of explaining your feelings to someone committed to misunderstanding them. Your heart grows tired of hoping for consistency that never comes. And here is the truth most people miss. This exhaustion is not a failure, it is a message. Your body is speaking when your voice has been ignored for too long. The universe allows you to feel drained because it knows you won't leave while you still believe you can endure. So it weakens the illusion by showing you the cost. When you finally admit how tired you are, not just of the conflict, but of the entire dynamic, something shifts. You stop fighting for clarity. You stop chasing reassurance. And in that surrender, the universe moves one step closer to setting you free. And when that exhaustion finally strips you down, when you no longer have the energy to argue, to explain, or to prove your pain, something remarkable begins to surface. In the quiet space left behind by emotional fatigue, a voice you've ignored for far too long starts to rise. At first, it's barely noticeable, a subtle pause before you respond, a moment of hesitation before you accept an excuse. But that pause matters, because that is where your intuition returns. For a long time, you were taught to distrust yourself. Every time you sensed something was wrong, you were told you were overreacting, too sensitive, too emotional. Slowly, you learned to override your instincts in favor of keeping the connection intact. But now, as your strength too, your form fades, your inner knowing no longer competes for attention. It simply speaks. You begin to feel the truth before it's spoken. You notice the discomfort in your chest when their words sound right but feel wrong. You sense the shift in energy long before the silence arrives. You stop needing evidence because your body already recognizes the pattern. This awakening doesn't come with drama. It arrives calmly, steadily, and without apology. What makes this moment powerful is that intuition doesn't demand action. It demands honesty. And once you're honest with yourself, the illusion loses its grip. You realize you've been surviving, not loving, managing, not connecting, waiting, not being met. This is the turning point narcissistic dynamics cannot survive, because intuition restores something dangerous to them, your self-trust. And when you trust yourself again, you no longer need permission to feel, to question, or to leave. The universe awakens your intuition only when you're ready to listen, not to push you into fear, but to guide you back to yourself. And from this place of inner clarity, the separation no longer feels like abandonment. It feels like alignment, because when you finally hear your own voice clearly, you realize it has been guiding you out all along. And once you begin trusting that inner voice again, something else becomes impossible to ignore. The events around you start repeating themselves with uncanny precision. The same arguments resurface. The same apologies follow the same betrayals. Different words, same outcome. At first, you hope it's coincidence. Then you recognize it for what it is. A pattern asking to be acknowledged. This repetition is not the universe being cruel. It is the universe being clear. Lessons are not whispered once and forgotten. They return until they are understood. Now that your intuition is awake, you no longer experience these cycles as isolated incidents. You see the structure beneath them, the rise of hope, the brief calm, the sudden shift, the emotional fallout, over and over again, like a loop you can finally name. What changes now is not the pattern itself, but your awareness of it. You stop asking why it keeps happening and start asking why you keep staying. And that question doesn't come with judgment, it comes with honesty. You realize that the repetition has been teaching you something about your boundaries, your needs, and the parts of you that were taught to endure instead of protect yourself. There is a moment, subtle but powerful, when repetition loses its ability to confuse. The emotional fog lifts because familiarity no longer feels like love. It feels like a warning. And once a pattern is seen clearly, it cannot hold the same power over you. You are no longer surprised by the behavior. You are no longer negotiating with it. You are simply observing it. This is where the universe applies gentle pressure. Not by changing them, but by changing how it feels to stay. The comfort you once found in predictability fades. The cost becomes obvious. And suddenly what once felt tolerable now feels intolerable. Repetition is the universe's way of asking, are you ready to choose differently? And when you finally answer yes, not with anger but with clarity, the lesson completes itself. From that moment on, the cycle no longer needs to repeat. Because you have learned what it came to teach, and you are ready to move forward without it. And once the cycle is finally recognized, once the repetition loses its grip on you, another quiet shift begins to take place. The isolation that once surrounded you starts to crack. For a long time, your world felt small. Conversations were filtered. Feelings were kept private. You learned to protect the relationship by protecting its secrets, not because you wanted to lie, but because explaining the truth felt exhausting, and being understood felt unlikely. But now something changes. The universe begins loosening the walls around you. A conversation opens unexpectedly. Someone asks a question you can no longer brush aside. You hear your own story reflected back through another person's eyes, and suddenly it sounds different, clearer, more honest, less distorted. This is not coincidence. Isolation is one of the strongest tools of control, and the moment you begin to step out of it, truth rushes in. You start realizing how much you normalized, how much you minimized, how often you defended behavior that was slowly draining the life out of you, And the most surprising part is not the judgment you feared, it's the validation you receive. You notice how your body relaxes when you're around people who don't make you explain your pain. You feel lighter after speaking honestly, even if your voice shakes. The loneliness you once felt inside the relationship begins to outweigh the fear of being alone outside of it. And that shift is powerful. This stage isn't about blaming or exposing, it's about reconnecting to reality, reconnecting to perspective, reconnecting to the parts of yourself that were slowly silenced. The universe creates space between you and the illusion so you can finally hear the truth without interference. And once truth enters, it doesn't shout. It settles. It grounds you. It reminds you that love should not require isolation to survive. That connection should expand your world, not shrink it. And as that realization sinks in, you stop feeling lost. Because the more connected you become to others, the more deeply you reconnect with yourself, and the path forward becomes impossible to ignore. And as that truth settles in, as your world slowly expands again, and your sense of reality feels grounded instead of distorted, something even more delicate begins to fall away. Not the person yet, but the illusion you held about them. This is where the real grief begins. Because what starts to dissolve is not the relationship as it was, but the relationship as you hoped it could become. You find yourself no longer defending their potential. The future you once imagined starts to feel distant, almost unfamiliar. You remember the dreams you built around small moments, the promises that felt powerful at the time, the version of them you believed would eventually arrive if you just stayed patient enough. And now, without force, those images lose their hold on you. This loss is quiet. It doesn't come with dramatic confrontations or sudden endings. It arrives in subtle moments. When you stop fantasizing about change, when you stop rewriting the past to make it more bearable, when you see their behavior clearly without rushing to excuse it, the rose-colored lens fades, and what remains is reality. This is one of the most painful transitions, because illusion often feels safer than truth. Illusion allows hope to survive, even in unhealthy soil. But the universe knows that as long as you're attached to the fantasy, you'll keep watering something that cannot grow. So, it's gentle. I removes the illusion first, sparing you the shock of losing both at once. You may mistake this stage for emotional numbness, but it's not detachment, it's acceptance. A deep, steady understanding that love cannot thrive on effort alone, and that consistency cannot be negotiated into existence. When illusion dissolves, clarity doesn't feel exciting. It feels sobering. Yet within that sobriety is freedom. Because you are no longer in love with who they might become, you are present with who they are. And once you see someone clearly without illusion, the universe has already done most of the work. What comes next is no longer about longing. It becomes about choosing yourself with open eyes and an honest heart. And once that illusion is gone, once you are no longer holding on to who they could be instead of who they are, a strange tension begins to surface inside you. You feel the truth clearly now, yet you hesitate. Not because you don't understand what needs to happen, but because letting go still feels terrifying. This is where the universe steps in more decisively. Because when you cannot release what is harming you, the universe often removes it for you. This doesn't happen out of cruelty, it happens out of compassion. The universe understands something the mind resists. That familiarity can feel safer than freedom, even when familiarity hurts. So circumstances begin to shift. Conflicts escalate without resolution. Distance grows where closeness once existed. The connection becomes harder to maintain, not because you stop trying, but because trying no longer works. You may feel like control is slipping from your hands, plans fall apart, conversations don't land the way they used to. What once held together through effort alone now starts to unravel on its own, and this can feel unfair, even frightening, because part of you still wants to manage the end-in. Gently, on your terms. But the universe is not asking for perfection. It is asking for honesty. It sees the part of you that has been strong for too long, patient for too long, hopeful beyond reason. And it knows that if the choice were left entirely to you, fear might keep you rooted in place. So it loosens the grip for you. This is the moment when loss feels sudden, even if it was long overdue. You grieve not just the person, but the control you thought you needed to exit safely. Yet beneath that grief is relief. Subtle, undeniable relief. Because when the universe removes what you were afraid to release, it is not taking something from you. It is giving you back your breath. And once you feel that breath again, you realize you were never meant to carry that weight alone. And in the quiet aftermath of that removal, when the dust hasn't fully settled and your heart is still adjusting to the sudden space, a painful thought often creeps in. You wonder if all this loss was punishment, if the suffering meant you failed, loved wrong, or stayed too long. But this is where the universe asks you to look again, with softer eyes and deeper understanding. Because what you went through was never meant to break you. It was meant to prepare you. Pain in this phase begins to reveal a different meaning. You start noticing how much stronger your emotional boundaries feel, even on days you still ache, how your tolerance for disrespect has quietly disappeared, how your nervous system, once constantly on edge, is slowly learning what calm feels like. None of that happened by accident. It was forged in the fire you survived. This pain was not random. It sharpened your awareness. It taught you the difference between intensity and intimacy, between attention and affection, between attachment and love. Lessons that could not be learned through comfort alone. Growth required contra. Saint and contrast required discomfort. You begin to see that what hurt you also trained you. It trained you to listen to your body, to honor your intuition, to recognize red flags without explaining them away, to value peace over chemistry. These are not small gains, they are the foundation of a healthier future. The universe never wastes suffering. It recycles it into wisdom, into discernment, into resilience. And one day, without realizing when it happened, you notice that the pain no longer defines you. It informs you. This realization doesn't erase the grief, but it reframes it. You stop asking why it happened to you and start understanding what it gave you. Strength you didn't know you had, clarity you once doubted, and a deeper respect for yourself than you've ever held before. In that understanding, the story shifts. You are no longer a victim of what happened. You are a survivor shaped by it, prepared, aware, and ready for what comes next. And as that understanding settles into your bones, something remarkable begins to return. Quietly, steadily, almost without announcement. Your sense of self. The parts of you that once felt small, uncertain, or dependent start to stand upright again. After everything you endured, self-worth doesn't rush back dramatically. It rebuilds gently, like a house restored brick by brick. You notice it in the smallest moments. You hesitate less before speaking your truth. You no longer feel compelled to over-explain your boundaries. You stop craving validation from people who cannot give it. The need to be chosen fades, replaced by the desire to choose yourself. This shift isn't loud, but it is powerful. Because for the first time in a long while, your value no longer feels negotiable. This returning self-worth is not arrogance. It is clarity. You begin to see yourself not through the lens of someone who diminished you, but through your own eyes. You recognize the strength it took to survive emotional chaos, the courage it took to stay open despite repeated disappointment. And instead of judging yourself for staying, you honor yourself for enduring and for finally stepping away. What's profound about this stage is that separation no longer feels like rejection. It feels like alignment. The universe restores your self-respect before closing the door behind the relationship, because leaving without self-worth often leads to longing. Leaving with it leads to peace. You stop romanticizing the past. You stop measuring your healing by how little you miss them. You start measuring it by how deeply you respect yourself. And in that space, your standards rise naturally, not out of bitterness, but out of self-love. This is the moment when the universe knows the work is almost complete. You are no longer asking why it ended. You are understanding why it had to, because the relationship could not continue without costing you yourself. And now that your worth has returned, the chapter can close without pulling you back into it. You are standing in your value, steady, grounded, and finally ready for what honors you. And when you stand fully in that self-worth, when your feet feel steady and your heart no longer begs for what once hurt it, the final truth reveals itself. Freedom does not arrive the way we imagine it will. It doesn't always feel like relief at first. Often it feels like grief, a quiet, unexpected grief that catches you off guard. You mourn what never fully existed, the conversations you thought you'd have one day, the version of love you kept reaching for. The belief that if you tried harder, loved deeper, stayed longer, something would finally change. Letting go of that hope hurts, even when you know it's necessary. And that grief can feel confusing because you are grieving a relationship you no longer want. But this is the universe's final lesson. Freedom is not the absence of pain. It is the presence of truth. And truth requires space to settle. That space can feel empty at first, unfamiliar, even lonely. Yet within that emptiness is peace, the kind that doesn't demand performance or self-betrayal. You begin to notice how quiet your mind becomes, how your body relaxes in ways it never could before, how your days feel lighter, even when emotions still rise and fall. This is freedom, learning how to live inside you. Grief and freedom coexist for a while. One does not cancel out the other. But over time, grief softens. It transforms into gratitude, not for the pain, but for the growth, not for the loss, but for the return to yourself. And one day, without ceremony, you realize something profound. You are no longer healing from them. You are living for yourself. The universe did not remove a narcissist to leave you empty. It removed them to make room for clarity, room for peace, room for love that does not hurt to hold. That is when you understand what felt like an ending was always a beginning. If you've listened this far, it's because something inside you already knows the truth. You didn't stumble into this message by accident. Every word you heard mirrored a feeling you've carried in silence, a weight you've tried to normalize, a strength you didn't realize was already forming. And now, standing at the end of the story, you're not the same person who began it. What you walked through was never random. The confusion, the exhaustion, the awakening, the loss, all of it was a process of return. A return to your voice, your boundaries, your worth. The universe didn't remove someone from your life to leave a void. It removed them because you had outgrown the version of yourself that tolerated being diminished. And here's the part that matters most. Healing is not about forgetting what happened. It's about no longer needing to relive it. It's about recognizing that love should feel safe, not uncertain. That connection should expand you, not drain you. That peace is not boring, it is powerful. You don't need closure from someone who never took responsibility. You don't need validation from someone who thrived on your doubt. The clarity you've gained is your closure. The calm you're learning to trust is your validation. So as you move forward, carry this with you. If something costs you your peace, it's too expensive. If someone makes you question your worth, they don't belong in your future. And if walking away feels painful, remember, staying was costing you more. The universe didn't take something from you. It gave you yourself back. And the most powerful chapter of your life doesn't begin with proving anything to anyone. It begins with choosing yourself again and again, without guilt, without fear, and without apology.